the things that amongst the things that many of us thought we knew, I'm sure we all took away one thing or the other on each day. I, for one, kept coming back each day because I was sure I was going to learn something new. We've learned about riding gear. We've learned about DIY, solo riding, group riding, and mental state. Today, we will be listening to a doctor who will be talking to us about first aid. And I believe first aid is one of the key things that saves lives, especially in a country like ours, where proper healthcare is a bit of a challenge. So I think most importantly will be what is done at that point. So welcome to everyone who has made it at this time. We expect others to join us as we go along. Our speaker today is Dr. Dirkat Poi. He is a family physician, a health promotion and disease prevention advocate. There is no wonder he's talking about first aid. He doesn't want to see you in the hospital. He's going to prevent you getting in there. He's a motorcycle enthusiast, definitely, obviously, if not, he won't be here, and an adventurer, as all bikers are. He enjoys motorcycle touring, and he has been on several national tours. Doc, you take out some time to tell us about your tours and visits all around the country. I want to know how many states you have covered. He's a solo rider most of the time, like a lot of guys who like to play it safe. He loves family time, reading, and taking on new tasks and adventures. So without much ado, Dr. Poi Dirkat, the floor is yours. Take us to paradise. Welcome, everyone.
All right, good evening, everyone that is here at this moment. I hope my voice is loud and clear. Let me confirm that first. Am I clear? Loud and clear?
Yes, you are. You're
right,
loud
good.
and clear.
Yeah, right. we can hear you, doctor.
Okay, all right. So today my name is Poi Dirkat. Today I'll be presenting first aid for motorcyclists, which is a very, very important, part of the motorsport. You always need to know what to do in terms of an emergency, in case of any injury or any accident. Know what to do and know what to do right. All right, so I'll try and use very less technical terms as much as I can. So our learning objectives will be, at the end of the presentation, we should be able to recognize an emergency based on the rider's appearance or behavior, whether he's shouting, whether the person is just quiet, we should be able to recognize whether there's an emergency there or an urgency. And we should also be able to know the responsibilities of first aid responders. You are the first person appearing at the motorcycle accident scene, you should know your responsibilities. And then also we should be able to know the right things to do at an accident scene, know what is right, know what is wrong to do. And then finally, we should be able to know the components of a first aid kit. And this is a first aid kit that we can easily carry in our top boxes or our side boxes that can take care of the first aid needs of any motorcyclist or anybody that has, an injury. So I'll be using this outline. I'll introduce the topic briefly, talk about the responsibilities of first aid responders. I'll talk about the first aid at the accident scene, and then I'll be using the acronym GLOVES. I just brought something so that it will be easier for us to, to capture and then to remember. So we'll be using the GLOVES as we go on. You know what GLOVES means, and then I'll mention the components of the first aid kit. I'll conclude and you'll have my references for further reading. So introducing our topic, first aid is just an English term, of course, we all know. First being before all, before any other. And then when we talk of before other in terms of time, that's the number, the time that people get there, whoever it is that will get there after you. So you're before that person. In terms of order of doing things, in the order when we talk of interventions that can be done concerning the incident. And then aid is just to provide support. So first aid before any other, and providing support. So first aid, the meaning of first aid is the immediate care you give to someone who has an injury or an illness. For the case of this presentation, is the immediate care you give to a motorcycle rider who has an accident or illness. And then this first aid is what we do before the EMS, the emergency medical services, which I'll refer to as EMS. What you do before the team arrives. I'm sure as the presentation goes on, we'll get to find out that we actually have EMS services in Nigeria, even though it's not functional in all states, but there are some states where it's functional. And then also we need to recognize that our actions at the accident scene can make a difference in either guiding the person, to the great beyond, or to keep the person alive. So what are your responsibilities as a first aid provider, as a first responder? You see an accident that happens, you're there on the scene, or you and your group are riding and then somebody just crashes into a car, or is trying to take a bank and then he decides to deposit the money somewhere else, it goes into the bush. So what are your responsibilities as a first aid provider? Number one is that you first need to recognize an emergency based on the rider's appearance, behavior, and surroundings. Sometimes when we have crashes on the road, you see the motorcyclist, either he will be shouting, and of course, when motorcyclists have accidents, they never ever, the first thing that comes to their mind, they never think of their body. The first thing is, my bike, hey, my bike, hey, my helmet, hey, before you even talk of other things, whether he's bleeding or not. So you that is coming behind, you should recognize an emergency. If you see a crash and the person is silent, dead silent, no screams, no shout, you should know that that is an emergency. And then that's the appearance. Then apart from that, apart from the person's vocalization, you can also check, the behavior of the person, the attitude of the person's limbs, are the limbs looking deformed and all that. Do you see blood anywhere? The surroundings, did the person clear? If it's just shrubs, of course, the injuries might be less. But if the person, he and his motorcycle cleared, the whole forest, that there's actually a problem. So you should always recognize an emergency. Or even when you're coming, assuming the person had a crash with another vehicle, based on the particles, the pieces of the motorcycle that you see on the road, or the car parts, or the windscreen that is broken or something, you should be able to recognize that as an emergency. And then once you recognize that as an emergency, one of your responsibilities is to make a decision to help and seek consent. As a first aid provider, it's not a must that you must assist, but you should know that once you assist, or once you go to render first aid, you must go all the way. You don't start and then you stop. So once you decide that this is an accident and then I want to, render first aid, you must go all the way. And then always seek consent. Sometimes we ride in riding groups, and of course they are friends, so they always want us to help. But there are other scenarios that you might just be riding and then you see a motorcyclist that just crashes on his own, someone that you might not know. You must seek consent. You must ask, hello, can I help you? If the person is conscious. But once the person is unconscious, just take that as consent already. If the person is unconscious, you go ahead and then you do what you can to help the person. And then the third responsibility is for us to be able to call the emergency medical services or law enforcement as required, because these also help in taking care of the accident scene, where there are suits or all that. And then also the medical services to be able to transport the rider to the nearest hospital to be able to seek further definitive care. And then the last responsibility that we should know is to be able to have safe access to the client until the EMS, the emergency medical services, arrive. And the safe access, as we go on, you know what the safe access is, especially the bad things that we usually do. Sometimes when the accident scenes, we just park our motorcycles on the road, you don't clear properly and all that. So you should be able to park your bikes in a way that if the emergency medical services arrive, they'll be able to have access to the injured or the bleeding patient individual. All right, so the first aid at the accident scene, once you get to the accident scene, you should remember to when you see that an accident has happened, always check for responsiveness. When you reach, sometimes the person might be shouting, screaming, my bike, my leg, my helmet, my jacket, that's already a response. You already know, you have an idea. Of course, the person doesn't have any, the main things that can cause death immediately. That's either blockage of the airway or internal bleeds or problems with their breathing. So once the person is shouting, okay, so that's a good thing. But if the person is not shouting and the person just clears into the bush, sometimes some people might be in shock and might not say anything. So you need to check for responsiveness. You can, hey, guy, alpha, guy, are you okay? You tap the person's shoulder, just to elicit a response and to make sure that the person is not unconscious. And then as you're doing that, you do it carefully, and then you need to check for life-threatening problems. And those problems are bleeding, you check, and then you see whether there's bleeding from anywhere, especially bleeding from the leg and then the thigh, which are very, very very important sites that can actually lead to the person dying in no time. So you should check for bleeding anywhere, either from the nose, from the ear. If you see any bleeding from the nose or from the ear, you know that definitely the person has a skull fracture, which will need emergent care. And then also check for limb deformities. How are the boots? Is the boot facing east and then his ankle is facing south? What was the attitude of his hand? I'm sure once we see something wrong with our bones, we always know. Instead of the bones being straight, it takes different curvatures. And then check for lack of response, which is a danger sign. Once you do all that and then the person doesn't respond, then there's a possibility that the person is unconscious or has some internal bleeding somewhere or some brain bleeding. And then also check for breathing signs as well. All those, we'll talk about those as we go. And then look for, is also important, sometimes we have check for identification of medical tags. Sometimes some asthmatics, some diabetics, some hypertensive, some people that have some certain medical conditions might have some tags which they might put on their neck or around their wrist. So you should just check and see if you see anything. And then you also search for clues or items that will give an idea of the accident cause. Maybe you see a car parked on the road and then maybe he went in, or a pothole, which is very, very common. Sometimes we see some kind of potholes that you can even hide inside and come out. If you hit those kind of holes, you can have some accidents. And then, like I said, it's always very important. We should seek consent. Anybody that you don't know, seek consent. Even someone that you know, just try and let him give consent that you want to help him. But anyone we don't know, please seek consent. As long as the person is conscious, always ask if you can help the person. But if the person is unconscious, that's an explicit consent for you to go on. And then at the accident scene, always think gloves. So this is the acronym that we'll use. And then even if there's anything we pick at the end of this lecture, we should be able to pick this, GLOVES. So as we go on, you'll know what it means. So for the first G, gloves, it means what? Get safety, which is very, very important. So once you get to the accident scene, make sure you stop in a location clear of the accident. Once the accidents happen, you try and either you ride away from the accident scene and make sure you clear off the road, maybe on the shoulders of the road. Most times, when the accidents that happen, we park our bikes, some just park on the road, some even park almost lateral to the center of the road and all that. So we need to clear the scene and make sure that our bikes are parked properly to prevent another accident happening in the scene of another accident. And then even as we're parking the motorcycles, you should park them in a way that easy access will be available for the emergency medical services when they arrive. And then if you have hazard lights, which of course most of us don't do that. Once there's any emergency scene or stops, you must always put your hazard lights, because even the motorcycles with all the gnarly lights, D7s and D4s that we have, some people will still say we not see you coming. So the bike is so small. So once we stop, make sure you put on the hazard lights of your motorcycles, clear the motorcycles off the road properly. And then if you have reflective jackets, it will also be very, very important for you to wear them if you have them. If you don't have them, fine, but just make sure the hazard lights on the motorcycles are working. And then, like I said earlier, you determine the nature or cause of the accident. Was the person unconscious when he was riding and nothing, he just rode off the road? You know that maybe there was something happened. Was he under the influence? What was the activity that he had before? If you were a riding group and you guys came from the same location before, was there a pothole? Was there a car just parked on the road? Was there an animal that just ran across the road? Determine the nature or cause of the accident to be able to know the impact. And then also you assess the number of injured people and then the helpers available. Number of bikers. Sometimes it might be some corners, like there have been some incidents during some old road runs, some corners. I think there was one to Ibadan where each one was just banking, and then when he's banking, he would deposit no cash. So they were just entering the bush. This one will enter the bush. The next one just sees the other one entering bush. Him too, he panics, enters the bush. So there was a scene that up to about 6 people crashed and all that. So you always need to assess the number of injured people so that you'll be able to give a report appropriately and also be able to tailor services to them. Because once you know the number of injured people, you need to find who has the most serious injury, and the person with the most serious injury may be, at most times, is the person that is quiet and unresponsive. Most times those are the people that are more injured. But anybody that is shouting, all that, they might have serious injuries, but you need to attend to those ones that are quiet and mute quickly. All right, so that's for the G. Then still on the gloves, we talked about G, which is getting safety or get to safety. Then now we're on the L. The L and O is lumped together. So I put it as law officers, either law officers or law enforcement. And this where the, when I say law enforcement, all the our traffic agencies and even the emergency medical services too, they also fall under this. So once we do that, once we get to safety, we've cleared the scene, we've found out the number of people, number of riders are injured, and then the probable cause of the injury. Someone has to call the emergency services, and that someone is the first responder. You that went there and then you decided to take consent and decided to start helping, you must go all the way. And if you don't do that, you must give directives to somebody and ensure that the person called the number that you gave to call. Sometimes at the scene, there's a lot of commotion at the scene, and then when you say something, there are a lot of people talking, people are doing this, people are doing that. So at the end, someone needs to take charge of what is there. So the most experienced person there that is ready, and knows how to render the first aid and is ready to do it all through, should take charge and then give directives. So we should always call the emergency service numbers, which are the EMS, the emergency medical services, or the road safety. In Lagos, you have the LASMA that you can also call, and then also the police as well. There are some numbers. I think it would be good at the end. We'll put them on speed dial in our phones so that in case of an accident scene, you'll be able to find it easily. So like I said, these people are very, very important for you to notify, to call them if they're available, because what you can only do at the accident scene is just the first aid. But life and death, can happen in a matter of seconds, especially someone that is bleeding, maybe has a cut wrist, or is bleeding into his the pelvis, into his hip, or is bleeding into his thigh. Just a matter of time, he will bleed out. So you must know what to do immediately, and then in a matter of seconds decide where to go, and then have the nearest have him taken to the nearest hospital. So like I said, the person in charge should be clear and specific. If you're delegating somebody to call, you have to be, you don't just say somebody called. You need to call somebody's name and say maybe RC or road captain, or you must know somebody there, delegate somebody to call so that the person will know that that's his responsibility. Because if you just say, please, somebody call EMS or call road safety, you don't know who is that somebody. Somebody is not somebody's name. Somebody can be anybody, and nobody can take fault for that. So when making the call, you need to be specific about the problem. You need to be specific about what is being done, to the accident, to the injured people at the accident scene. You need to notify them on the number of victims so that they'll be able to have the appropriate rescue vehicles to evacuate whoever is injured. And then also the location as well is very, very important. So that's for the LO. So in Nigeria, you'll be, well, you might not be surprised. Like people in Lagos, they might not be surprised because I'm sure you've been using some of these numbers. But we have some emergency service numbers that are very functional in Nigeria. We have 112, which is National Toll-Free Emergency Number. With this 112, once you call it, it can actually connect you to the different support groups, which include the police, LASMA, the Lagos Emergency Services, the Federal Road Safety. Can also connect you. It's a national toll-free emergency number, and I actually tried it, and it's actually working. I didn't call for an emergency anyway. I just called to see if it was if I'll get any response. You know, most of the numbers that we have, you just dial them. It's either the numbers are decommissioned or they are switched off, or you know something. The person with the phone just went and put the thing off at home. And then we also have other numbers, still the 112. For the Lagos Emergency Services, 112, like I said, is national toll line, so you'll be able to get emergency services. And then also 767 also goes through, and that's functional in Lagos for Lagos State Emergency Medical Services. And then we also have 122, which is for the Federal Road Safety. And these ones we're able to get through to any of these ones, they'll be able to, you know, take the injured to the nearest hospital. Although we know most of the Federal Road Safety ambulances, they are not really equipped to give any care within the ambulance. So what they only do is to help to transport the injured to the nearest healthcare facility for definitive care. So we move on to V, and V means volunteer help. Like I said, once you get there, you must decide whether you want to volunteer or not. So V is to volunteer help. So the first on the scene with medical training, either medical training or if you have any sort of let's say knowledge, medical knowledge or health education or anything on CPR or first aid, should attend to the down biker. Even if you don't have, well, at the end of this presentation, you should be able to know the right things to do and then the wrong things to try and avoid. And then also the person that volunteers help, you try and seek help from others who may arrive at the scene, you know, tell them what is happening, tell them what you need them to do, whether to clear the area, to call the numbers or whatever. And then you check for a pulse, signs of breathing or bleeding. Now this is going, I don't want it to sound too technical. The easiest way to check for a pulse, you can check it just the carotid pulse just on the neck here, just one. You can just press it and then you feel something thumping on your finger. So you can easily do that. You can check for signs of breathing. That one is easy. Either you can look or you can feel. You look, you can see the chest rising. Once you see the chest rising, of course, you know the person is breathing. Or you can feel, you can put your face towards the person's nose and then you feel for the puff of warm air that comes out. And then you need to check for bleeding. You need to look at the person, you know, check whether he's bleeding from his nose, from his face, from his ears, from the hands, external bleeds anyway, because, you know, sometimes we have accidents and we have internal bleeds. But for the ones that we can see, it will be very important. And then try and talk to the victim to elicit the response. Like I said earlier, guy, how far, you know, are you okay? How you doing now? How wait happen? How far, you know? Let's just talk to the victim and make sure they're talking, and then let's try and get a response. And then most times when it happens, let's try not to move the victim unless the victim is in life-threatening danger, maybe on the center of the road or something. And then we need to know how we move the victims. If they're inside the bush and the person is unconscious, there's as we go on, we'll know how we can move the patient, you know, carefully and not to create more harm in our trying to help the patient. So another thing is that once you see the person there, unless the person removes the helmet by himself or is shouting, if you meet somebody that is unconscious, please do not remove the helmet, but you can open the visor. But I'm also going to show you how we can safely remove the helmet, you know, so that we can remove it. But if you don't know how to remove the helmet, please just leave the helmet in situ. You leave the helmet intact, open the visor and be able to talk to the person. And then even as visor is open, you'll be able to check if he has any bleeding or anything. Why? Because if we don't know how to remove the helmet properly, if the person has any injury to the neck, to the spine, to any of the bones, as you're removing the helmet, you can actually make it worse, and the person can actually die at that spot. So with our emergency medical kits, with our emergency first aid kits, whatever first aid, we can use it to provide we can also do so. So that's for the V, volunteering help. Now, how do we remove helmets properly and safely? Now, helmet removal, the picture is there, so I made it. It's very, I think it's easier and it's easier to see. You need two people. You need one person stabilizing the head below, and then one person that will be removing the helmet. So one person will have his hands, just on the jaw here to stabilize the head against the neck so that the head doesn't, it doesn't move left or right. And then the other person pulls the helmet up, just rocking it left and right and then trying to pull it off instead of up and down. All this is to prevent, because sometimes if in accident, you can have injuries to the bones of the neck. That's the vertebrae on the neck where the spinal cord passes through. And then if you have a fracture or injury of those bones, and then you're moving the helmet in an unsafe way, the bones, the vertebrae can actually cut the some roots of the cord. So it's very important for us to know how to remove helmets, please, unless the person is shouting and then he's sitting up and all that. But if the person is just mute, lying down on the floor, please, let's remove the helmets properly. So once again, I wrote this several times for a reason. Seek consent. I think this is the fourth time I'm saying it. Always seek consent for a conscious person. Always seek consent. So yeah, we've mentioned all this. So in their unresponsive patient, you've gone there, the person is conscious, is shouting, fine. You say, okay, can I help you? And all that. But if it's our guy, let's just go on. The impression is from his looks, whether he actually is an emergency or an urgent case or a warm case, and then from his behavior, pain and bleeding as well. So now for the unresponsive patient, which is the one that is more in the danger zone, you must always consider neck injuries, like how I've mentioned over and over. And then make sure you place the person on his back, carefully guiding the head. Make sure you place the person, let the person just lie on his back. You tap for response. And then if there's no response, you need to initiate. ABC is just a term that we use for airway, breathing, and circulation. And then you need to initiate CPR for the patient, for the individual. So I'll just mention just some things about ABC and then the CPR. For CPR, I think it's something that you need to have training in, and then the scope of this discussion won't allow us to discuss that. So I'll leave some sites that we can always visit, and then just take some. It's just normal learning. Just take some lessons on it. So ABC is just airway, breathing, and circulation. That's just the meaning of airway. So for the person that is unconscious, what we're afraid of is, either there's some foreign body in his mouth, or his tongue is blocking the airway, so he cannot breathe. So what we can easily do. I don't know if you can see my mouse. If you can see the pointer. I'm pointing to the first picture there, which is the chain lift. Well, for anyway, the problem with doing this is that sometimes for individuals that we think have neck injuries, this can actually worsen it. But I'm just mentioning it for the sake of this discussion. Because for people that have the suspected neck injury, the jaw thrust is better done. Well, I'll just leave that. The jaw thrust is just, you just bring the jaw forward, and all is just to help, clear the airway, and then make sure that the whole, the throat, the mouth, and the tongue is not falling backwards to prevent the person from breathing normally. So like I said, you also check the breathing, you look, you listen, you feel, you look for at the chest, you listen for breathing sounds, and then you feel. And then also check for circulation. Like I told you, always check for pulse, because if the pulse is not there or the breathing is not there, that's what guides, how you go about the CPR. CPR is cardiopulmonary resuscitation. So this is somebody here. The second picture there is just somebody listening. She's looking at the chest for it to be rising, and then she's listening for his breathing, the gush of air from his nose, and then she's also feeling his chest as well. And then the last picture there is the recovery position. That recovery position is anybody that was initially unconscious and then becomes conscious. You put him on the left side position. That's a recovery position. Now for the CPR is a different ball game altogether. and one should be trained to perform this procedure. You cannot know how to do CPR without having training for it. So that's why I left these sites are where, there are a lot of sites, a lot of places that you can go and get some basic training on CPR or basic life support. CPR is one of the components of basic life support. So it will be very, very good if we take on this, just any of, there are a lot of sites, and there are a lot of sites, they are online and then there are offline sites. So any of them, you can just go on, you can just do normal reading. You'll be able to learn a lot, and that can actually save, someone very, very close to you. And then, like I said, courses are available everywhere. It's 30 compressions to 2 breaths. You see what he's doing. That's the way you put your thumb, you put your palm over the other palm, compress the chest, about 1/3 of the chest, one third diameter of the chest. That's from the top to the back. You compress it. So you're going to give 30 compressions of this to 2 breaths. Well, and you do this, the only time you do this is if the person has no pulse and the person isn't breathing. That's when you do this. But if the person is breathing and then you've made sure that the airway is clear, the person is breathing and has no pulse, you give just the compressions. So like I said, please let's check the different sites for lessons on CPR. It's something that you need to have training on. It can't be discussed in the scope of this discussion. And so we move to E. E is enclose. And what's enclose now? Enclose is that you're going to document names and phone numbers of witnesses that the people around, especially if it's a riding group, you all know yourselves. But if it's an accident that happened and you don't know anybody around, and this applies to all accidents, not just motorcycle accidents, but it's just for the sake of our discussion, I'm just limiting it to motorcycle accidents, but these are things that you can do at any accident scene. And then let's try and take photos and make notes, take photos of where the bike is, how the car is, because at the end, sometimes when you're making insurance claims, someone will say, no, he bashed my side mirror, he bashed my windscreen. Meanwhile, he wasn't there, and then you didn't have pictures. So you must always have pictures as evidences. And then the accident scene should be enclosed, and well, for this particular part, leaving debris of vehicles in place, in Nigeria is actually very, very difficult. In other climes, sometimes they put the tags and the tapes around and then nobody touches anything for investigation. But in Nigeria, once anything happens, everybody's just packing everything from the road, the headlights, the broken pieces, everybody's packing. In fact, sometimes you won't even see anything because the remaining cars will come and climb on all the other parts and particles, and then you will not know. But as much as possible, what we can do, let's just do it. And then this is also for not just for us here, because we don't know where we will end up. So wherever we are, let's just know the right things to do. So all these can also help in investigation of the accident, either by the law enforcement or by insurance companies for claims. And then lastly, in the gloves is to summarize reports. So you have to report all findings, including names of the witnesses, victims, statements, and photos to law enforcement. So law enforcement, that's either the police, if a case is coming up, or maybe there's loss of life or something, of course, the police will always be involved. And then also those findings as well will also be reported to the hospital where you'll be taking the injured to. And then also what is very important, if it's a group ride, if it's a club ride, if it's whatever it is, it should be reported to the chain of command, up the chain of command, up to either the group leader or the club president, so that everybody will know, you need to account for each other and account for every rider. And then all information should always be kept confidential. Always be kept confidential. And that's one of the reasons why consent must always be taken, because sometimes, if you do all those things without taking consent, somebody might just come and sue you. You're just trying to help, but the person will just sue you and say, you did this, you did that without, and then you let this information. So you must always take consent and then make sure everything is confidential. And then all the reports also is for insurance claims, like I said, using either the accident insurances or vehicle insurances. All right. So gloves, I'll go through it again. Gloves, G, get safety, LO, law officers, V, volunteer help, E, enclose, and then S, summarize your report. Now, if you can see my slide, there's a picture there of some items that you can have in your first aid kit. So just basic kits that you can take around. You need to have your gauze, which is that woolly material that you can use for dressing. You must have gloves, because sometimes if somebody is bleeding, you need to protect your hands. You don't want to come in contact with blood substances and fluids. So you need to have gloves to be able to comfortably carry the person or touch the person. And then a tourniquet or a sling. I really didn't emphasize on tourniquet because, there are sometimes when those tourniquets is anything that maybe a limb is bleeding and then you get maybe a sling or a shirt or something, and then you tie on the upper part of the limb to try and reduce bleeding. Why I didn't talk about it, sometimes when people apply this tourniquet, or people usually forget it, even when they reach hospitals, and then that just leads to the death of the limb. They forget to remove it, and then the limb just dies. So that's why I didn't mention anything about tourniquet. Then we need to have plasters for small injuries. Well, suturing items, especially if there's anyone that is medically oriented that can suture, cuts or lacerations there. You need to have your bandages, you need to have your analgesics, whether it's paracetamol, that's acetaminophen, or diclofenac or ibuprofen. Because sometimes, especially I know sport riders, they can attest to this. They always finish their tours with neck pain, wrist pain, ankle pain, stomach pain, brain pain, everything. So the analgesics will work good for people that use sports bikes. Then the CPR mask. Well, this CPR mask is like part of it is like a mouth. When you're giving the mouth to mouth, instead of just giving the person a direct kiss, sometimes also to limit your contact with body fluids, there are some marks that you can put on the mouth before you give the mouth to mouth. And then tweezers, disinfectants who can also be very, very important. If we look at the picture, I don't know if you can see my pointer. If you can see it, fine. You can see something like Dettol there or Septol. You can see a suture. You can see thermometers. You can see bandages and gloves. You can see antibiotic ointments. You can see what do you call it? A temperature blanket. This is actually a gold blanket that you can use for, especially where the place is very cold. It can help you conserve your body heat so that you don't have hypothermia. And then you can see tablets. You can so this is just a guide. This is just a guide for you to know what to put in your first aid kit, and it should just be something small that you can actually carry about easily. All right. So in conclusion, being a first responder at a motorcycle accident scene is a very delicate situation, and it's a very, very important situation, saddled with a lot of responsibilities, because you need to take the decision whether you're going to help or not. Earlier on, you're not obliged to help at an accident scene. If you decide to help, you need to go all the way, and you need to do the right things, to prevent harm. So actions or inactions could determine the relative outcome of the injured. What you do or what you don't do can either lead to a positive or negative outcome. And we should always know the right things to do and do them well. So in parting, I'll just leave you with the 10 safety tips to avoid a motorcycle accident. So the main thing is for you to prevent yourself being the one to be given the first aid. Although there are some times that the accidents happen and it's not your doing, but some other times there are things that are actually within our control. So the 10 things are: 1, you need to be aware of your surroundings. You need to see the cars ahead before you overtake. Don't overtake at corners. You need to be clear and to be aware of your surrounding. Always wear a helmet when you ride to prevent any head injury. Whether you're going to buy whatever, please always wear a helmet. Don't drink and ride. Even with your normal eyes, we've not finished gauging where the potholes are. Then you can imagine if you're under the influence. Then we should always follow set limits. Don't ride above your limits. And please, somebody, can we mute him? Don't ride faster than your angel. Don't ride another person's ride, and avoid common mistakes. We always tell stories, during our motorcycle rides, when we get to where we are, we always, see, I made this mistake, I made that mistake. So I always learn from other people's mistakes and avoid common mistakes. resist sharing lanes. Sometimes I see some motorcycle rides, they're on one lane, the riders are side by side. That's actually very, very dangerous because anything can happen and then you can hit the other rider. So let's resist sharing lanes. That you ride staggered or just ride directly behind the person in single file. And then let's always maintain our motorcycles. If we have chains, let's make sure we oil our chains properly or whatever, to prevent to try and prevent us getting accidents. And then, of course, it's very important to hone your riding skills. The more you ride, the better you get. Ride within ride within your limits. There are a lot of books. For a person, there are some books I actually read when I started riding. The Twist of the Wrist. There are some books I actually read that actually helps me. And then, like we've had in the previous sessions, always wear the right riding gear. And then avoid bad weather conditions. When there are thunderstorms and you can't see, please avoid riding. When there's a lot of fog, you can't see, please avoid riding. So my reference is there from where I got this. Thank you very much for your time and attention, and I hope I didn't bore you with too many technicalities. So these are my references if you need to read further. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Doc, for a wonderful presentation and especially the bonuses. Thank you for the bonuses, the safety tips and the references, which will take us further. Accidents are very common in this country. And when there's an accident, the first thing you see is people are screaming and crying. People run away, then they congregate. Then people start to pray. They start to move people in a very funny manner, killing them before they can get actual help. So this is very, very timely. Thank you so much. I personally have learned a lot, and I believe everyone here has taken away something. For those who joined in late, the recordings will be available at some point. So we'll take questions from the comment section first before we open the floor to everyone. So if you have your questions, please be ready. Raise your hand. You will be called to have the floor at some point. So Tom let me ask a question. It says, how practical is it to make a report and list names of strangers present at an accident site? Doc, the floor is yours.
Okay. Well, about the report the report you're writing is not about the strangers. Like I said, there are sometimes you have the accidents and then it might be a group ride. During a group ride, you already know everybody that is there. But for the strangers that are there, the people that are actually volunteering to help, the people that are volunteering to help, since they volunteer to help, their names should be accessible, and then we should know, because when there are insurance claims or something, or you need a witness or something, they should be able to be pulled up with their consent. That's why you must always volunteer to help.
All right, thank you. I believe that should have answered your question. And I heard this says, can you give names of some of the books you read to help riding?
Yeah, one of them is A Twist of the Wrist, is volume 1 and volume 2. Yeah, and then some other YouTube, some YouTube videos as well. And then also eventually I also read FD's book, So in fact, there are a lot of materials that can actually help you. But that A Twist of the Wrist is actually very, very nice. I actually enjoyed, even if you don't read it completely, just flip through and then just be looking at the pictures. It actually helps very well.
Right. Look, you send us a full list later. You can type it in chat bar or send it through.
All right, I'll send a soft copy. I have both soft copies.
Oh, beautiful. That would be nice.
All right.
Coxco, your hand is up. The floor is yours. Please unmute yourself.
Yeah, good evening. And thank you, Doc, for the wonderful presentation.
You're welcome.
My concern is just about our environment, Nigeria. That's why in the comment section, I tagged Emmy's question by using Nigeria as a case study. Nigeria is just very funny. I was watching an accident clip on YouTube where the guy fly over a bridge and landed in one of those swamps. And immediately they call, helicopter was there, and immediately rescue was done. But in Nigeria, even our emergency numbers, they hardly pick it up. So all what you've said are beautiful in countries where things are working. But how do we relate it to our real situation, our real scenarios where we don't have any help at all?
Okay, so like I told you, the number that I put in, the 112, is a national toll line, and it's actually working. If you try it, it actually works. That's one of the things that we can do. And then let's not forget that within wherever we have an accident, we always have locals that know the nearest hospital, know where the nearest road safety person is, and all that. And then also we have motorcycle riders we have friends, who ride in almost all the states in Nigeria. And then they always have the numbers of, those road safety, those police and all that. So it's good when you have an accident anywhere, always have the number of a local rider there, because most times they have all those informations that you need, and information that will be able to help whoever is there.
All right, thank you. In addition, I'll say that the things that make things work, apart from the system, and even part of the system, are human beings as well. So if we arm ourselves with knowledge and take the first step, others will be emboldened to do the same. So as bad as our situation is, the knowledge you have and the action you take, or the decision to take action, will also make that big change, no matter where we find ourselves. Mutibe, the floor is yours. Please go ahead, ask your question.
Dr. Dirkat, good evening. This is Queen. Dr. Dirkat, this is Queen.
Yeah, good evening, Queen.
In Abuja.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, okay. I wanted to ask for your reports. Do you have a template that could be shared in the biking community, so that whenever, we share it across all our platforms, so that one has an idea of what a typical template should be like?
Okay, well, it won't be difficult. I don't actually have a direct template, because each accident is a different encounter. But the template is nothing so serious. The template is just the accident. It's just this. The report is just to give a summary of what happened at the accident site. That's the number of riders who are injured, the rider, the type of injury, where they're coming from, where they're going to, and then any association they belong to.
Yeah, I understand. But, normally when in those type of moments, when there's usually panic, when you try to put down all your info, sometimes you don't have all. But if there was like a big...
Hello, Queen, we can't hear you.
Queen, you're off.
Well,
Queen.
If I can take it from here, I'd like to, I think I have a fair idea of what Queen is trying to say.
Yeah, I understand.
I think we can take it as a learning point from here and an action point. Yeah. So we can develop a small template which will serve as a reminder, which every road captain on a trip should have. So in case of an accident, whoever is appointed as road captain should know these are the things we must take away from this point and have captured information-wise. I think we should take that from there, and that's something that we should be armed with, as well as our first aid kits when we go on rides now, especially as a group.
Yeah, that's very true. I think the template is an easy thing to do. No problem. We can get something very easy, and then communicate it to the different bodies. That will be easy to fill, so that you don't start thinking of different things. At least you have the questions there, and then you already know what to fill. Just something very easy. So no problem. I can get a template over.
Thank you very much. We have 7 minutes to go. We have enough time to take a few more questions, contributions. You can share your personal experience, and let's all learn from it. I have a personal experience. I was on a ride. There was an accident, and we had called the road safety guys. Prior to the road safety guys appearing on the scene, I took charge of the scene, and a very interesting thing happened. This was a person who had multiple fractures, and the road safety guys wanted to just load him into the back of their vehicle. I stopped them, and I actually had to use some form of physical force, and I got a bit aggressive to stop them. And they said, our work be this. I said, no, this is my work. I've taken this and this is not the best way to move this man. I put my foot down. It was a bit tense, but by the time I managed to splint the fractures, and I now took time to explain to them that we need to move this man as a log and not just carry him and throw him in like an animal. They calmed down. We spent close to a minute rehearsing how we're going to actually lift from the floor where the person was onto the stretcher and then into the vehicle they had brought. By the time I took charge with some form of knowledge, they calmed down and everything was, everything ended up well. So I think once you decide to take charge of a scene, you need to be knowledgeable and be prepared not to back down, because that action you take could make a difference in someone's life. That's my personal contribution to this. The floor is still very much open. We have 5 minutes to go. Costco, I see your comment. It says, Nigerian road safety. I talk calm down, they're not so bad. Queen, your hand is up again. Do you have a question again? Please go ahead.
Yeah, Dr. Dilkat, for
Yes,
the what you call it, the first aid kit. I know you listed some things, but
yeah.
Is it possible to either put it in the chat or I don't know, share it? Maybe they can have it, or maybe Nengi would do that, share it on the platforms so that people can build their own first aid kits. Reason I'm saying this, I was involved in an accident, was it in 2018? And we were doing the road raw. And when we got to Ikogosi, because of the sharp bend and there was sand, we had over 5 bikes that all went down. One of them had a very bad fracture. And I noticed that while they were trying to clear the bikers at that corner, nobody had a first aid kit. I was the only person with a first aid kit. Now, my issue is that I keep wanting to build a first aid kit that is peculiar to bikers, because every profession has their own first aid kit. So what I wanted, since you are a doctor, could you list for us in the chat or maybe share with Nengi so Nengi can share on the platforms and we can also keep cascading the stuff that everybody should have so people can build their own personal first aid kits when they're traveling. Thank you.
Okay, I will do that. No problem.
Yes, Doctor, a question now. This has come following Queen's last contribution. What are the common injuries we expect that are peculiar to bikers when they're involved in accidents? Because, you know, accidents is very broad. Road traffic accidents is equally very broad. So what are the accidents that are peculiar to bikers, first the rider and pillion, so that we have those on our mind and look out for them if we're on the accident scene?
Okay, so for this question, there are 2 angles to it. One, if the person is fully well kitted. And then 2, if the person is not or partially kitted. Of course, you know, the person that is fully kitted, most times they have less injuries. But however, the common injuries for someone that falls, screams, gets up, and goes back to his bike to start looking for his bike, most times they are bruises, you know, just bruises, muscle pains, most times just bruises and muscle pains. And the bruises, the antiseptics that we have in our first aid kit should be able to take care of those with the bandages or the plasters that we have. You should be able to disinfect it and then wrap it. For the muscle pains, of course, that one won't happen immediately. That's a later event, because immediately, you know, there's a lot of adrenaline going on, so the person won't have those kind of pains. So later on at the end of the ride, you know, he starts having those muscle pains and all that. So the analgesics that you have in your pack can take care of those. But the other extreme, for someone that is poorly kitted or not kitted, in fact, there's a whole spectra of events that can happen, from head injuries, you know, like there was someone recently that was riding, I think in the was it Delta, or he wasn't with his helmet, you know, and he crashed, you know, the head just scattered. And then another one wore The helmet wasn't actually a good quality helmet. And then when he had the accident, of course, he had some head injury as well. So the extreme injuries go from head injuries to fractures of either the limbs, either the forearm or the arm, and then the thigh or the leg fractures. Those are very, very common. And then for the extremes, of course, when you have the head injuries, of course, you know that that accident is actually quite extreme. So when people have head injuries, they can have fractures of the base of their skull, they can have pelvic fractures, they can also have internal bleeds as well, either splenic injuries or liver injuries or any bowel rupture. But that's actually the extreme, that's the extreme. But the common ones that we have is just the muscle pains and then the bruises that we usually get.
Thank you very much. Queen, your hand is still up. You still want to contribute?
Sorry, apologies. I'm taking it down now. Sorry.
All right, that hand should be pinning you right about now.
Mm-hmm.
All right, our time is up. I don't see any hands up. I don't see any questions in the chat. After Abubakar, please go ahead.
Hello, good evening all. Yeah,
Good evening.
I'm trying to suggest that in most of the bikers program we normally do, we should have a session whereby we should be trained on first aid. Like here in JBMC in Gombe, we normally have that in almost all our programs. We have the Red Cross, their training officers to come and enlighten us, give us a 5-10 minutes training. I think it will broaden in our imaginations on first aid, and it will really help us. So I think we should carry it to other clubs. We have a lot of programs going on around the country. So just giving them like 5 to 10 minutes to train us on first aid, I think it will really help us and be a reminder to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abubakar. That is a very serious and very good point you've made. Being president, you're here present, we would advise that all clubs should imbibe this and have some professionals come. We can never get tired of hearing the right thing.
Copy that, Boma.
All right, my president, thank you. I don't see any questions. I just see comments. We see comments, just comments in the chat room. Well, Dr. Dirka, thank you for your time. Thank you for the knowledge you have shared. And I would like to tell us that the mere fact, as you've gotten this information, you have a responsibility now. You cannot walk away from any accident scene ever. And then as much as possible, let's all learn to do, get some benefit of learn CPR. Because in the Western world, everybody knows CPR, but here everyone is scared. So let's do our best to get that knowledge. And from us on this side, it's a wrap. I want to say good night. Thank you to Bing, thank you to Scan, thank you for BSI for giving us a wonderful week, and we look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doc.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night, all.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
You know, that the vegetable leaf is working. Aye, that is guy. Don't show me. I want me to be telling me. Me? Don't worry. I pray make you do reach where I come. I'm winning it.
Hello? Stone.